Hey, and welcome to iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Ron. I am your host, Alan J. Campbell, aka the Batman. Hey, listen, it's great to be back. Um, we've got a lot of things going on right now, and there's a couple of things I'm going to get into tonight, or the topics. And I'm going to jump right into one. I'm going to jump right into it, and this is one of those proverbial things, as they say. It's an old saying that old people used to say. You're like a bad penny. You keep turning up everywhere. And right now, all eyes are on the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. This has to be the premier nightmare shit show for Kim Foxx. It has to be, because here's what's happening. We've had the thing with the Jesse Smollett back here in February. Then in March they dropped the charges. Then people had this gigantic question about, now just this past Friday, Judge Tooman appointed a special prosecutor, which is a former prosecutor. He was a federal prosecutor, the former assistant U.S. attorney, Dan Webb. Now, let me tell you something about Webb. I grew up in the era of Dan Webb. Dan Webb he's a bad son of a gun. He really, really is. Let me tell you something. When Dan Webb investigates you're going to prison. Make no mistake about that. You are going to do some jail time. This is the guy. Dan Webb was the guy that also, he was a defense lawyer for George Ryan. Now understand something. Hear what I said. You're going to prison, okay? And Dan Webb is really good. He sent a lot of high profile individuals to prison in his heyday. Okay, now he has been appointed special prosecutor to investigate the Cook County State's Attorney's Office on what the circumstances was behind them dropping all the charges against Jesse Smollett. Now, moving forward, just today. Now, I'm not sure if a lot of you remember this story. There was a young man by the name of Darian Albert. Okay. In 2009, Darian Albert was killed by a group of young men. They beat this boy to death. And when I say beat this boy to death, I'm not talking about beating him to death with their hands. They beat this boy with their hands, their fists, and if you're not familiar with this, is a railroad track tie. Those are the large pieces of wood that you see supporting the rails, supporting the rails for trains to go across. They beat this boy to death with that. Okay, beat him to death. Now, 5 people were arrested with this young man's murder. 4 of which were tried as adults. 1 was tried as a juvenile. Okay, and that individual who was tried as a juvenile winds up. There was a lot that went on behind this on why they didn't charge him along with the rest of them. And at the time, and see, this goes back to when you're not understanding or knowing how the system really works and understanding your job. Kim Foxx was the state's attorney for the juvenile division. Okay, the juvenile division. Now, the one guy who was tried as a juvenile is back in court today. He caught a gun charge. Now, to give a bit more backstory on that, his initial sentence, if he was tried as an adult, he would have got prison time, just like the rest of them who are still sitting in prison right now. But by him being a juvenile, he didn't get the jail. He didn't get adult time. What he got was basically a 30-year suspended sentence. Okay, 30-year suspended sentence, and that was contingent on the deal that Kim Foxx made with the deal that Kim Foxx made was that, hey, if you don't get in any more trouble, if you don't get into any more trouble, this will go away. Wait a minute. How does that even make sense? You killed somebody. How does that even make sense to you that if you don't get any more trouble, that we're going to make this go away? And she didn't say it in those words, but that's essentially what she was saying. That's essentially what she was saying. Now, shortly after they made the deal, he got caught up in the end, and also, and the understanding was that he was not to be charged with another felony. Now, here, that was the catch. He couldn't catch another felony. Now, during the time that he has been released from juvenile prison, he caught another felony, running from police, leading police on a chase. Now, with that being, and see, this is still attached to his juvenile record, his juvenile file. That's a felony when you flee from police. That's a class 4 felony, which is a 1 to 3. But to circumvent that, the understanding was he could not get into any more trouble or catch a felony. Otherwise, they would invoke the 30-year sentence. What did Kim Foxx do? She threw that away. She did not enforce it. And subsequently, he got probation from running from police. Now, just over the weekend, this same individual was charged with a gun charge, aggravated guns. Okay. He went to court today. He's got no bond. But that's a third felony. This is a 3-strike state. This is a 3-strike state. Okay. And the understanding and understand certain felonies when you reach that third strike, and the understanding is that each felony, they have to be of the same class. That means that if you're doing home invasions and you keep catching home invasions, those are 3 strikes. But the fact that his crimes are violent crimes, it falls under the same umbrella. Under the same umbrella. Now, her office once again is going to catch absolute hell because once again, if this dude if they had held to the original sentencing guidelines, that if you catch another case and it's felony, you're going to prison for 30 years. 30 years. See, this is an individual. Once again, this is why I said this is where Kim Foxx does not know what she did. She does not understand the letter of the law between juvenile law, juvenile court, and adult court. There's 2 types. There's two schools of learning here. 2 schools of learning. She's already got a challenger for the office. This guy is 27 years old, and not only that, but his daddy is a millionaire. He's already put $500,000 in his son's war chest to run against Kim Foxx. I'm telling you, make no mistake. And it doesn't make any difference that the Democratic machine is endorsing her, but here's the thing: they're endorsing her, but they haven't put any money into her war chest. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? What does that tell you? See, this is the proverbial thing to where we are put in a position of power, and we just absolutely just completely fall on our own sword. You had an opportunity to straighten something out, to bring change, and you didn't do it. We got to understand, and I've said this time and time again on the show. We have to understand we cannot do what white people do and expect the same outcome. We cannot do it. We get caught if we're in corporate America and we're stealing, and my engineer will agree with me on this one. If we are in corporate America and we get caught stealing money from the company till, and our counterpart, a white person or Hispanic, gets caught doing the same thing, you know what they call it? For us, it's theft. It's grand larceny. But for them, it's called embezzlement. You see the difference? It's the same crime. It's just on how it's worded. Embezzlement, theft, grand larceny, misappropriation of company funds, embezzlement. It's the same thing, people, but we cannot do what white people do. And at some point or another, we have to understand that we have to wake up and understand it and stop walking around in this medically self-induced coma that we keep doing to ourselves. But I'm gonna come back. I'm gonna horse you around to that, back to that, this Kim Fox thing here, because it's just this is just never going to go away for her. The best thing for her to do, and I will be the first one, and I will be the first person here to say it, the best thing for her to do is that she should step down. She should resign. Even though it is an elected position, you still can do that, because you have completely ruined the integrity of the state's attorney's office. You have lost the support of the rank and file members of the police department. And if you do decide to run, you're going to need these unions, the fire, such as fire and police. Most importantly, you're going to need the police union. And you shot yourself in the foot when this Jesse Smollett, and not only that, but then this situation with the killer of Darion Albert, who once again is out there committing crimes, who you let off the hook. And her words were, it was that her words were, it would not have been in the interest of justice to send this young man to prison. I'm not understand. Help me understand that. How as a prosecutor can you even remotely say something along that lines when this individual was involved in the brutal beating death of another. He was, even though he was 14, he understood right from wrong. He knew what he was doing. He took the life of someone else's child, and he did it with malice and viciousness. How do you equate that it would not be in the best interest of justice for him to serve that sentence? Help me understand that. And if you got an idea, please let me know. Walk me through it. I'm just letting you know that the phone lines are open here at the studio, 708-223-8953. That's 708-223-8953 here on iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rohn. Now, I'm gonna move on to another story, and this goes back to what we talk about on a constant basis, and we have to understand that this is another thing that's never going to go away. It's not going to go away. Racism. And we talk about that more than we should, only because we still believe that it's not happening. We still believe that that at some point or another, we're going to have this swing low, sweet cherry, kumbaya moment. It ain't going to happen, people. It's not going to happen. Now, here we have a fellow in North Carolina, and I'm not sure if any of this is one of the things where I tell people all the time. See, the biggest thing that we don't do that's our own, that is our undoing, is that we don't read. We don't read. We don't look at the news. We don't look at certain news feeds and try to understand what's going on. Look at news that's outside of your 8-block radius, and look at how other people are living and what's going on with them. Here we have a man in North Carolina. This man, and this could happen to any number one of us. Okay. And how many of us have, and I know most of you may have an alarm in your home. When you leave out your house, you're setting your alarm. But the asinine, but the thing that is so asinine is that you happen to be in your home and your alarm goes off while you're inside your own home, and police show up, and you are treated like a common criminal, even after you have given them the identification, you have explained to them who you are and why you are there, but you are still treated as a criminal. We had a gentleman that was in North Carolina, and he was at home. He had just got off work the night before, so he went home and went to bed and set the alarm. And most people do that. Most people do that. How many of you have gotten home in the middle of the day, or whatever, and you've laid down for a few minutes and you just say, you know what, because you want to feel safe in your own home. Remember now, in your own home, lay down, turn the alarm on. And this guy, what he did is that he worked. He's a club promoter there in North Carolina. He got home, got undressed, got into bed, turned his alarm on. Somehow or another, the alarm went off and sent a false burglary signal. It sent a false signal. So when he realized what had happened, he gets up and he disarms. He's disarming the alarm. And at this particular point, he's hearing somebody beating and banging at his door. So naturally, as a homeowner, keyword, as a homeowner, now this is his house. He gets up, grabs his gun, and he heads downstairs because he's hearing people trying to come into his house. So at that particular point, now we know that this could have gone sideways in so many different ways. Unbeknownst to him, police were on the other side and they were trying to gain access or entry to the home because they received a burglar alarm. He's defending, he's armed to himself because he doesn't know who these people are. So as this goes on, um, he greased the police officer. And this is a young cop. This is Johnny Two Guns. He greased the officer at the door. The officer comes to the door, gun drawn, and tells him, gives him verbal commands. Hey, back up. Put the gun on the floor and blah blah blah. Now, let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this cop may have been one of those trigger happy cops and just blew this man away before he can even, because he saw a black man in a home in his pajamas with a gun. Now understand something. This man owns the home, and apparently this is a part of this town in North Carolina where they're pretty nice homes up there. And I guess they figure, well, niggas shouldn't be living up here. That's the general thinking. So what they did is that once they got in and they gained entry, they grabbed the homeowner, this man, and they put him in handcuffs, and they marched this man outside in just his drawers, his underwear, out in front of his neighbors, in front of the neighborhood, and placed him in the back of a car as they cleared the house. Now, here's the thing. Now, there's two sides. This is the two sides of the same coin. Now, speaking from law enforcement, from a law enforcement perspective, you're responding to an unknown. You get there and you're greeted at the door by someone that you don't know, and you haven't, and you're on high alert because, hey, it's a burglary. This is a burglary in progress. Okay, this is a white police officer, a black man. Okay, it doesn't take much for this to go left in a blink of an eye. Now, once his identity has been established, it should have ended right there. But they continued to humiliate this man. Not only did they walk him outside, but they went through his home. Now, like I said before, in not so much as in defense, but in looking on the side of law enforcement, naturally that's what they would do. By this time, several more police officers came and they began to go through the house. The idea was that they come in and they clear the house to make sure that there's no one else in there, and this is the right owner. Now, during this process, the homeowner asks for a sergeant. Now, let me tell you something, people. Let me tell you something. Whenever, and you have the right to do this, you have the right. Make sure, and see, the same way that they give these immigrants, hey, you have the right to do this, you have the right to not do this, and this, that, and the other. Hey, when ICE comes to your door, we have to understand we have the same rights, but we have to understand how to present them. We have to understand how to interact when we're talking to them. Very simply put, if you have with a police officer and you feel threatened, or you feel that this is not going to go well, or you feel that you're being singled out, you're being mistreated, very simply put, comply and ask for a supervisor. If he refuses, continue to ask for a supervisor. You make sure that you get his name and his badge, and if all possible, get the number of his vehicle unit. Get those things, okay? But you have the right to ask for a supervisor to be present. Now, as it happened, while he asked for a supervisor, a supervisor did show up, but he didn't the supervisor did not de-escalate the situation. They didn't even ask the man's name. They just went on the assumption. So when another supervisor showed up, he got there, and apparently this supervisor, once he got there, he knew who the man was, and he knew that this was this man's home, because obviously this police officer and this homeowner obviously had worked together prior. So the supervisor gets there and he says, "Hey, I need everybody to get out of this house. Get out right now. Get out, get out, get out, get out." Some officers wanted to give him lip. He said, "Get out. Hey, I know this man. This is his home. This is the homeowner. He is the homeowner." The problem is that, once again, we are still dealing with, I don't care what you have, what you got. Racism is here. Racism is here, and it's here. Make no mistake, it is here and it's here to stay. This was a clear cut case of profiling. Now, I'm gonna tell you now the funny part. Now, there is a funny part to this. And this is the part, once again, of us being ignorant, stupid, and being passive. There's nowhere in the world I can be passive. If you walk up to me if you walk up and spit on me, there's nowhere in the world I could be passive. No, let me rephrase that. If you walk up to me and purposely spit on me, just understand something. I got a can of whoop ass in my back pocket with your name on it. Point blank, period. Now, as the supervisor began to de-escalate the situation and explain to everyone what was going on, he stated, hey, welcome to iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rohn. Who do I have on the phone, and where are you calling from?
This is Jay from Georgia.
What's going on, Georgia? What's going on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just calling in and just wanted to join the conversation.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna throw this part, because this is what I call the punchline. After this was all said and done, this black homeowner said, "I will be just fine with an apology." I couldn't believe this man said that. There's no way in the world an apology would be accepted. This once again, this is almost to a point where it's the slave way of thinking. This is the master or the massa coming down to the slave quarters, because you didn't have a house, you had a shanty, and a shanty is different from a shack. Make no mistake. This is the slave owner coming down and coming down to the shanty. The slaves, the husband and the wife, they are engaged in a level of intimacy, and you doing your thing, and she's saying ooh and ah, and he kicks the door in and he says, "Hey boy, get up. You don't have the right to that." And then he begins to mount your wife and tells you to go stand in the corner while he does your wife. And he says, "Now I'm done. Don't touch her until I tell you to." And you stand there and say, "Yes, sir, boss. I'll do that." That's the mentality. For him to say, I will be fine with an apology, you might as well say that's okay for this dude to sleep with your wife, and you okay with it. But go ahead, caller. Go ahead, Georgia. That's my opinion. But go ahead, Georgia.
Well, so let's peel that back just a little bit. The first problem in your analogy is very simply put, that ain't your wife. This is my property. And I can do with what my property, when and whatever, however I please and choose to do it. And you also, as my property, are going to be okay with it. Because I'll have no problem trading you, branding you, killing you, much like I do a dog or a horse or any other of my livestock that I have on my farm. So let's be very clear. The mentality of that is prevalent and is still prevalent today. We have to understand, and we have been socially conditioned, brainwashed, however you want to call it, to think that racism is strictly about somebody not liking you, someone not preferring you on the basis of the color of your skin. And that's the most ignorant and illiterate explanation of racism imaginable, because it makes you ignorant of the process that supports the institution of racism. So I'm going to say that one more time. There is an institution upon which racism functions. Racism is an institution of systems and policies. And until we are educated, or we educate ourselves on how that principle works, we will never be able to counter it. You're walking around here talking about somebody don't like your skin, or they didn't hire you, or they didn't choose you because you black, because you come from this side of the tracks. No, that's the overt reason, but that's not the reason. That's the excuse. Or a better way is, that's the symptom, not the cause. Racism is an institution of policies and principles that sets up an entire support system to manage how it keeps itself within checks and balances. If you don't believe me, think about this. This is why black people could never be racist. Okay, now I'm going to have a few people that just lost right there. But black people can never be racist, especially in the continent of North America. The reason why you cannot be racist is because you do not possess any of the control, enough of the resources, and enough of the wealth to dictate the destination or the destiny of any other group of people, any other class of people. You do not have it. You could never walk up to an Asian and say, you cannot buy in this neighborhood. You could never go up to a white person and say, you can't drive that car. You can't have that job. As a matter of fact, we won't even consider you for the position. You don't have that power. You don't have enough substance. You don't have enough saturation into the very system that you're contracted in. So therefore, you can't be racist because you have no control. You have no equity. Racism is founded upon those principles that a ruling class now sets and gets to dictate who will have the pecking order or the hierarchy in preferential treatment and privilege. So I'll digress and we'll move on. The other part of that is we have been so socially conditioned by the education system, the religious systems, the socioeconomic systems, to be what I call a word called amenable, which is basically means that you are subdued and suggestive, or persuaded to work with whatever seems to be the common good. That's our problem. But the common good does not serve you. But that is what you are. You are amenable. So you don't want to become too aggressive. You don't want to become too outspoken. You don't want to become too deliberate in opposition. So you become persuaded to get along and go along.
Would you say that, and also would you throw that in there, passive?
Well, it's a passive persuasive doctrine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It is, in my opinion, to be amenable as a man is nothing short of social castration.
That would be a good analogy.
Because you are positioning yourself to be, as the Webster says it, of a person. It's an adjective of a person or an either male or female, but of a person to be open and responsive to suggestion, easily persuaded and or controlled to that.
Sounds like the Democrats.
I'm not going to go there with that either. However, you do have a point. But the point is, but the bigger picture is, we have been socially conditioned that everything that we have is subject to someone else's approval. That is why a black man who owns his own home can protect or is supposed to be protected by the very law enforcement that his tax dollars from his home pay, is paraded outside like a circus animal in his drawers in his front lawn, under the presumption that he is the very predator that they're supposed to protect him from.
Yes, that's exactly what they did. And the part that's not even surprising is that they refuse to allow this man to present identification, or and even not as far, and they didn't even go as far to even ascertain who this man is or why he's there. The fact
because
that
you have to come to the very fundamental fact that, again, the Supreme Court in 1878, under part of the Hayes-Tilden Agreement to remove federal troops and federal protection from the South, and the Supreme Court decision shortly thereafter basically said that even though the Constitution told us that we were no longer slaves, it still failed to prove any jurisdiction or credence that a black man has any rights that a white man is legally to uphold or be subject to. That's what it says. The Supreme Court of the United States says that the black man or the slave or the Negro has that a white man is bound to honor or respect.
Yeah.
It's on the books. Look it up. Now, here's the funny part.
Wow.
100 and some years later, we had a constitutional lawyer who became a president, and he failed to correct a Supreme Court mandate. None other than the place himself, Barack Hussein Obama. I want to make this very clear for the soft melons in the room with the halo around the head. Barack Obama and Michael Thurman, or shall we say Michelle Obama, were constitutional lawyers. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But they failed to even address the 3/5 compromise, the 3/5 classification of African Americans being 3/5 of a human being. They failed to make the Supreme Court go back and adjust the decision that black folks have no rights that white folks are subject to obey. They failed to do that. But I guarantee you, people who can't figure out if they male or female, boy or girl, or swinging twigs and Marys, or riches as I call them, swinging riches, their rights are protected.
Very true. Very, very true.
So in another story I believe that you were covering, you'd mentioned something about the 14-year-old who got his head split back.
Oh, I'm gonna give you a full story now. Here, it just and just hear and bear with me. Now, this is the one thing that what we go into, and it goes on to what one of the other things that I say, and I love this slogan. Again, this is us chasing the wrong dog. Now, we have several ministers here in the city of Chicago who are basically developing a coalition to tell the state's attorney's office, Cook County State's Attorney, that they feel that okay, let me give you the backstory on what happened here. About 2 weeks ago, there was a home invasion carjacking. Six black teenagers here from the city of Chicago decided to take a trip up to Gurnee. Now, for those who are not familiar with, that's the north suburbs. That's the north. So that's where, that ain't nothing but money up there. Nothing but money. So these knuckleheads decide to take a trip and carjack someone. So they get to a location and they decide to they catch a homeowner who's apparently either pulling into his garage. They approach, they draw weapons, they draw a gun. The homeowner, who has a concealed carry permit, opens fire, killing one of the suspected carjackers. Okay. Now the story gets funnier and funnier as I go along. Now, make no mistake, people, I can't make this up. I'm not that clever. This was in the news about 2 weeks ago. Look this up. Now, in the process of the shooting, they left his accomplices took off running, and they did steal the man's car. They stole his car anyway. They left the boy who was shot, the 14-year-old. They left him in the middle of the street and off. As they're going down the street, as the offenders are going down the street, they stop a police officer in Gurnee to say, "Hey, one of our friends has been shot." While the officer is getting the information on this situation, it comes the robbery comes across the radio. He hears it, and he realizes that the very people that he's talking to are the ones who allegedly committed this crime. Subsequently, the one who he's talking to, he places him in custody. So they've got 2 of the 6 now. The other, two of the 7, because there were a total of 7. The other 5 jump back into the vehicle and take off from Gurnee, from the north suburbs, back down to Chicago. The car runs out of gas. They jump out the car and they scatter. Then police catch all 4 of them. Now, leading up to this, now there's a law, and this is a law not only here in Illinois, but this is a law across most of the states, across all the lower 50, the lower 48, I should say. When a person is killed during the commission of a crime, you are charged with that person's death. You're charged with that murder. Say, for the sake of, and just to give you a little bit more understanding, say you and 3 other people decide to rob someone, and in the process of running away, you accidentally shoot your partner and kill him while you were robbing another individual. Well, they catch you. You're charged with that. You're charged with the murder, even though it was an accident, because your actions facilitated that. This boy's actions facilitated that murder. So now what's happened is that all five of them that are under arrest now, they're charged with all of them are charged with first degree murder, home invasion, felony aggravated fleeing police, and carjacking. All felonies. Not only that, but the biggest felony is they're charged with felony murder. Felony murder is when a person is killed during the commission of a crime. So now we got these preachers that are coming out and saying they don't think that's fair. How come the homeowner is not charged with killing this boy? Listen, he was trying to rob him and he blew his brains out. He had a right to do that. We all have that right to defend ourselves when someone is trying to take something from us. But the asinine part is chasing the wrong dog is these preachers. And I tell you one by name. His name is Minister Ira Acree, who is leading the charge and saying that they believe that these juveniles these individuals, because they're trying all of them as adults. They have a 16-year-old, 3 17-year-olds, and an 18-year-old. And they're charging all of them as adults, which they rightfully should. Charge them all with murder because their actions created this situation. That is how that is the interpretation. And under Illinois law, they are using that. That's called and years ago they used to call it accountability. That's what it's called. And so that's what's going on. And now these preachers are getting together and trying to create a coalition to saying that they think this is unfair. But where are these same jackasses with all the violence that's going, with all the shooting and the guns and things going on? I don't hear that. Go ahead, Georgia. I know you want to say something.
Well, very well explained, but let me just start by saying this. Today's pastor, preacher, pimp, ball teacher is an opportunist. He's just as dangerous as a blood-sucking tick on your dog. He literally is a parasite, he or she. Let me just not discredit them. The reason why I say that is because they look for any and every opportunity to attach themselves to a host to extract some level of blood.
They're opportunists.
Point blank. Opportunity. Now, first of all, what is interesting is their perspective. As a preacher of the gospel, somewhere in the Bible, it says that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It also says somewhere in the Bible, according to the Levitical law, that if you steal something or if you take something from a man, you are to repay it 7 times over.
Correct.
Somewhere in there. It also says that you should not lead your brethren into sin. Somewhere in there. Not sure where. Just throwing these broad strokes. So my question becomes, what are you teaching every Sunday? If this becomes your rebuttal that the justice system has failed these youth who did every bit of what they are charged with doing. They did every bit of what, and we're saying that until they are proven guilty, but the allegations say that they have done everything that they are charged with doing, first of all. They contributed to someone's death in the course of that, number 2. And number 3, whether this dude was black, white, green, purple, whatever, when you have a concealed carry, or even if you don't, if you have a firearm and you come across the wrong person and you try to take their property, in case your ratchet mama and your broke daddy never told you, that's what you call a crawfishing on a bet. And you are going to lose. To lose. This young boy lost his life. And to be totally honest with you, I have no remorse.
Oh, wait a minute. Did I tell you? And wait a minute. Not only that, but here's the funny. Now, here's also the hook. This happened at 2:30 in the morning. 14 years old.
Well, I was going there.
But no, I wanted to make sure. Frame. Right. I wanted to make sure.
My question was, at 14 years old, At 16 years old, where are the parents? See, I'm a big proponent that 90% of what happens in our community has nothing to do with white supremacy, but everything to do with our or our unaccountability. Why is your 14-year-old not at your home? Why is your 16-year-old not at your home? Oh, I know what you're going to say. Well, I can't watch my kids all the time, and I don't know where they are all the time.
Or I can't,
what you're saying,
or I can't control them.
Oh, well, we have something for that. There's a phrase that a friend of mine told me. If you continue to make excuses for your child's actions now, you will be paying for me to defend them later. The choice is yours. And our problem is, as you said so eloquently, we are always chasing the wrong dog. Here's another part of that same scenario. There's this whole thing that we, and I talk about we indiscriminately, as colored people are engaged in, called the chicken sandwich challenge.
The chicken salad challenge.
Well, chicken sandwich challenge, excuse me. Where these Sambos, if you will, have commenced to making Chick-fil-A and Popeye's chicken and doing online comparisons and on the social media comparisons, talking about who got the best. Well, here's the bigger part of that. Not one time has either company requested any of this endorsement. Not one time has either company paid any one of you jackasses to go buy one of these sandwiches and sit there and eat them like a Sambo eating watermelon on the side of the road in Mississippi. But you have created a pocket of wealth for these two chicken giants in an excess within the last month, mind you, of $30 million in sales.
Say what?
Okay. Now, this is for the ignorant consumer. Well, some black folks own Popeye's chicken too and Chick-fil-A too. They're franchisees.
Right. It's a difference.
So that's part of what they do. Nothing wrong with that. But what you're missing is that they created some felonious challenge, sold it to you, and like a jackass, you went running right up to the trough, getting as much as you could feel. That's exactly what a jackass does. You get on his back and put an apple on a string and a stick and tell him to walk. Once again, instead of us developing or coming together to figure out an economic development plan or to really strategize and to have them talk about the real discussion of reparations, your dumb black ass is going to buy somebody's chicken sandwich.
And then getting on social media and saying, who is the better? Oh, yep. I saw that, and I doing what I do and doing the research and looking at it and just and there's some things that it even makes me scratch my head and saying, are we really doing this? It's no wonder that the rest of the not so much as America, but the rest of the world looks at us as complete jackasses, or the proverbial fool, the proverbial jesters in the king's court.
Court jester in the world court.
In the world court, exactly.
So here's the last point. Very last point. So in that same vein of being the court jester in the world court, we still have, and once again, been absurd with this reparations conversation. You notice how that was a blip on the damn radar, and it has disappeared like gone the way of the dodo, as you say. Why? because it was a talk point, a tick mark to help get your black self to think that we talking about you. But you know what has not failed? And you still haven't figured this out? What is not going out of the media? Immigration. These brown people that need protection from the law. These brown people that need support and their families need to be maintained. You're so foolish, and you're so, Malcolm X said it, you have the political and social intellect of a seventh grader. And that was 50 years ago.
And didn't and I'm glad you mentioned that. Just to and just a sidebar on the part about that too with the immigration. And here's the other thing. Trump he's finding ways, and this is because he's surrounded by some really, really smart people, and they're finding the back doors that's been there. He's just found the back doors to different things in different ways. Okay, well, since you feel that now you're gonna come here, and this is gonna go on. This is going for us too. Since you want to come here and you want to absorb all of our benefits, meaning WIC, SNAP or food stamps, a medical card, and things of that nature. Now, in 1980 in the 1980s, 1970s, 1980s, they made it it's a federal law. Now he's enforcing that federal law when it comes to benefits. If you are an immigrant, they are requiring these individuals, even though that some of them are legalized or they have gone through the process. Now that you come here, now that they're enforcing it, that now that when you come here, you have to show that you will not be a financial burden on that country. That's a federal law. That's something that the Democrats created.
Correct.
And he's using it.
So let me say this, and I'm gonna be very brief with this. There's a movie that I believe that our people should watch, because if they're not careful, certain movies are actually the blueprint of the next wave of things. There's a movie came out a little while ago called Hostiles. And Hostiles was basically kind of a cover story that tells you a little bit about what happened at Custer's last stand, but it gives you a little backstory of the sentiments that was growing and was being embraced as America was becoming indifferent to the expansion of the frontier, Western frontier, but also in doing that, the removal of the savages or hostiles. And the reason why, to me, that movie speaks so grand to our current condition is because hostiles was the terminology that they gave these Native Americans who really were not hostile. See, we have to understand that whoever wins the war writes the history.
Right.
The Indians or the Native Americans were actually retaliating because the United States and the government had crawfished them because they were selling land that they had promised the Native Americans was a safe haven for them to reside on.
Right.
And the short of it is, if we are not careful, people will begin, and they already kind of have, to develop a level of indifference to our suffering. And once people develop an indifference to your suffering and an indifference or disconnection to your plight as fellow human beings, then your annihilation is all but sealed. And you will be posted on somebody's mantle like a damn deer on a fireplace. That's my minute. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you. I hopefully, and what we talked about, then I hope you all take something away from, let me rephrase that. You take as much as you can with you, and hopefully it works its way into the deep recesses, into the deep core of your mind, to where you understand, first and foremost, in order to understand a people, you have to understand who you are. In order to understand who you are, you got to understand where you come from, and most importantly, you have to understand where you've come, where you're going. You have to understand that. We have to understand it, and we have been culturally conditioned to eliminate ourselves, to erase our own history. Culturally conditioned to do this, to erase our own history, to allow certain entities to come into our communities and set up shop and dictate to us what we can and cannot do, what we can and cannot buy, what we can and cannot live, what we can and cannot. We are eliminating ourselves. We are eliminating our own history when we neglect our children and allow them to fend for themselves, or allow them to raise themselves or fend for themselves, as we go as these individuals go on about their lives as if these individuals were a stain on the wall or an afterthought. Because what you're doing is that you're breeding another society of people who will develop an indifference to not only to others but to themselves. And as Georgia said, when people begin to develop an indifference, you are no longer important. You no longer exist. No longer exist. And this is where we at. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump and the White House. Make no mistake, has nothing to do with this. What this is. This is just an individual who has brought a lot of things to the forefront and to the light. So for your dumb ass to look at and see and understand, racism has always been here, people. It never left. They're just white people out here, white supremacists, white people out here who have been there. These are the ones that have been waiting in the shadows and using their level of entitlement to exert themselves. That's all. That's it, and that's all. If you really want to understand, certain things, and not to mention, I know a lot of people may disagree with me, but you have to really do the history. You have to really, really look at some of the things that this administration has laid down and put in place. We have to really look at this. We can't go off of what somebody says. The biggest thing, and one of the biggest things, like I said before, that we don't read. We don't read. We will take what somebody tells us, and then we'll take it as law. No, find out the information for yourself. Because there are several things that this man has put in place and has asked people to do for people of color, meaning people that look like me. People that look like me. I might have some white people listen. I might have some brown, some Hispanics listen. But understand something. You don't look like me. You do not. We have to turn the tide of, because there is understand, mathematically there are more of us than there are Hispanics and white people. Make no mistake about that. Make no mistake about that. But I see the lights flashing in the distance, and the helicopters are about to land on the heliport. And that means that's all the time we have here for iHeart Intellectual Radio, the Chronicles of Rohn. I want to thank my sponsor, Captain Hook, over there on 85th and Cottage Grove, 103rd and King Drive, and 15922 South Kedzie in Markham. Want to thank them. And you know what? And in closing, not my monkey, not my circus. To the Batmobile. Hit it.
To the Batmobile. Let's go. Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed. Roger. Ready to move out.